talking about the sanctions and focusing on the repercussions of such sanctions and further financial support for Ukraine, we're joined by our next guest, Teivo Teivainen, world politics professor from University of Helsinki. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening.
Let's begin by taking a look at the financial support for Ukraine. What are the legal challenges of the takeover of the assets, the Russian assets? Why is it so difficult to make that final decision and bring a lot of that financial help directly to Ukraine?
Well, as we've already heard here in the program, there's been a big debate in past weeks and months. In judicial terms, it's kind of complicated. In general, the dilemma is that on the one hand, property rights that include the fact that somebody owns an asset, and even if it's frozen, it's still in principle property of its legal owner, are something considered more or less sacred or untouchable in traditional Western thinking and more or less in capitalist principles. And then there's the argument that now the situation and the geopolitical need to support Ukraine is so big that something needs to be done. And there's a huge legal debate about how to find a measure that's sort of like seizing the assets might be complicated, freezing them is okay, and then how to use the interests. When does it amount to a confiscation that could be seen as a problem for legal theory? More generally, this will set a precedent for the future, and people who are for further confiscatory measures around Russian assets say it's a good precedent, and it means kind of deterrent in the future for people who start wars of aggression, states that start wars, that they know that their assets might be frozen. And then again, our opponents say the legal complications are such that it will mean more instability in the future world order when assets are no longer as secure as they used to be, if those that have the power to seize your assets are willing to use it. So that's more or less the general dilemma that we have here.
Right, but this is truly, it sets a precedent. If we look at the billions and billions of dollars frozen over 3 decades, Iranian funds and monies, if you will, never before has the interest that accumulated on those frozen assets been used in a way like this before. So this does set a precedent, correct?
Yes, indeed. Though, of course, there have been confiscations in earlier times where properties have been seized by the United States during and before the Second World War, with then states considered enemies, Italy, Germany, Japan, and various kinds of confiscatory measures were done against individuals and companies from these countries. But in the current sort of supposed system of rules in the global economy and a rules-based order, this is indeed new novel territory, and of course it gives also possibility for those who are critical of Western-led global institutions to say that, hey, you are not supporting the kind of rules-based order that you yourself speak so much about. And this is what China has been quite vocal about.
So there was also a signing of a bilateral security deal between the U.S. and Ukraine, and as we heard from President Zelensky, this is a bridge to Ukraine's future NATO membership. So clearly, this is incredibly important, especially in future terms. Are such agreements binding on subsequent administrations, especially if we consider that there could be potentially a new president coming after the upcoming U.S. presidential election?
To be honest, I don't know. Of course, the possibility that there will be a change of administration in the US will imply many open questions about what previous agreements will be respected or not. I think the general feeling is that with Trump, one cannot be sure.
Now, I'm going to bring us back to the original topic, and that's the $50 billion loan. Now, basically, European and American banks are putting up the money for this. So are they essentially taking the risk in this loan?
Well, there's this debate, for example, what does it mean for Eurozone? And some European commentators have been worried, especially since many of the assets on which these interests are based are within European territory and within the Eurozone. So will it mean risks for the future stability and confidence in the European financial system? Some say it will, others belittle the risks. And honestly, I don't have the answer to what extent the risk is something that might really have an impact on, for example, euro in the future. For now, it seems that neither euro nor dollar has been greatly affected by these plans. So it might be that the risk is not as high as some are claiming.
So earlier in the program, we heard from Marek Steele, our colleague here on TVP World. He came with a quote from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who said that this sort of use of the frozen Russian assets is theft. I was wondering, what are the risks from possibly using these assets?
One part of the risks is what kind of countermeasures Russia will be able to make. And there are these calculations about what kinds of Western assets might be within the reach of the Russian government if it wants to have countermeasures. There are maybe not that many state assets of Western states that Russia can reach. Then there are individual investors and companies whose assets might also be threatened if Russia decides to take strong countermeasures. But then there are other risks. For example, if the Chinese react in ways where they say we no longer have the same confidence in Western financial system and start using some countermeasures, probably arguing that they are only to protect their own investments, and that might then create further instability in the global financial system if we see Chinese like moving their assets away from certain Western places where they have them. So these are at least the two kinds of risks that we see right now.
Well, there certainly hasn't been a lot of talk about that, de-seeding the greenback or the dollar as a world currency, as a reserve currency. Based on what we're seeing right now, though, I think we're still a long way off from that. But if we look at BRICS is trying to increase their transactions between each other in national currencies. So in your opinion, is there a risk of dethroning the dollar anytime soon?
Well, that's indeed one of the clearly explicitly stated goals of many in the BRICS community. And they have been trying to find ways to have trade between them and between different countries in non-dollar currencies. And it's hard to say how soon this would be effective. Some have been talking about the possible BRICS currency. I don't see that emerging anytime soon. But more or less, I think it's not too risky to say that there's a certain decline of dollar in its global hegemonic role as the currency used by more or less everyone beforehand in their trade transactions, and that hegemony has been eroding, and it's quite possible that it will further erode. But it might be that the threats or countermeasures that the Russians or the Chinese are possibly taking now, I don't think they will lead to any rapid change in that situation, but they will certainly pave the road for more gradual erosion of dollar in the hegemonic position it has held since the Second World War.
Teivo Teivainen, world politics professor, University of Helsinki. Thank you so much for this commentary.
Thank you.